Hey folks, quick heads up. This video is only a part of a comprehensive course on VueSchool.io. Dive deeper and master advanced techniques by checking out the full course linked in the description below. Happy coding!
Welcome to Quasar Fundamentals. You are going to love this framework, and I honestly can't wait to show you a lot of the cool stuff it can do. Quasar comes with a command line tool. So if we want to start our app as an SPA, we can say, hey Quasar, I want to develop an app. And can you please set the mode equal to SPA? Now it turns out SPA is the default option. So if we get rid of SPA there and mode, that's going to launch our app as an SPA. And there we go. Quasar app running with an SPA using Vite behind the scenes. So let's go ahead and look at some of the other options that we've got. We can build an SSR app. Hey Quasar, I want to develop an app. Can you please set the mode equal to SSR? Let's go ahead and run that. And now we have an SSR app running, and we're able to run the SPA app and the SSR app at the same time. How cool is that? So Quasar does a lot of cool stuff behind the scenes to make sure we don't end up with clashes with port numbers. So you'll notice that they're using different ports so that these apps don't clash. And it means that you can develop in a whole bunch of different modes at the same time. Now let's try a desktop app. Hey Quasar, I want to develop an app. Can you please set the mode equal to Electron? So Electron is a tool that allows you to build desktop apps. This basically means that we're covering Windows, Linux, and Mac. So Electron allows us to build apps for all of those platforms. So if I go ahead and run that, since I'm on Ubuntu, this is going to run a Linux application, and now we can develop a desktop app. And this is really cool because now we have access to a whole bunch of desktop APIs within our app. So just as a basic example, we can start working with the file system really easily, and we can start working with different APIs that only desktop apps would allow you, that you wouldn't get in a normal browser app. Okay, let's close a few of these down. And now we're going to do a mobile app. And to do mobile apps, we use Capacitor. So hey Quasar, I want to develop an app. And can you set the mode equal to Capacitor? And we also want to set the target here because Capacitor allows you to build for both Android and iOS. So we say, I want you to set the target equal to Android. And if you were on a Mac right now, you could also do iOS. All right, so we'll set that equal to Android, run that. And this is going to open Android Studio, and I'll show you how to get Android Studio installed later on in this series. So that pre-selects a phone that's already connected to my computer, and then all we have to do is press the play button to now run that app on our phone. So I'll click on that, give it a second to run, and now we can start developing an app live on our phone. And check this out. If I open up Chrome and then jump into Chrome://inspect, and then select devices on the left here. Let me just make this a little bit bigger so you can see. This right here is our app running on the phone. So if I select that, now we can develop our app with everything that Chrome DevTools has to offer. So we can look at individual elements. We've got our console that we're used to. And now if I click on this button here, that's going to show up on my phone. And on my phone, if I click out of it, everything's in sync, so it shows up there as well. It's really, really easy to start building mobile apps with Quasar. And we now have access to mobile APIs, so we can access the camera, we can access Bluetooth, and Capacitor has a whole bunch of cool plugins that basically allow you to write Bluetooth code, for example, and that code will work for both Android and iOS. So you can really easily build apps for both of those platforms with one code base. It's really, really amazing, and Quasar makes it super simple to do. Okay, so let's jump out of that, jump out of Android Studio, shut that server down, and the last mode I want to show you is a browser extension. Hey Quasar, I want to develop an app. Can you please set the mode equal to BEX, which stands for browser extension? So we'll go ahead and run that, and it's going to tell us where the files for that browser extension are. There that is. So if we want to do it for Chrome, we can grab the folder there, or if we wanted to use Firefox, we would copy this one. And now if I click on these 3 dots for Google Chrome, and then I select Extensions, Manage Extensions, we can then click on Load Unpacked and basically just paste that folder in. Now, I've already done that, so you can see this is the app that we're working on. So we can jump up here and then click on Quasar Taste, which is the name of this app. And there's our app as a browser extension. However, there's all sorts of other cool stuff you can do with browser extensions. So for example, this is an extension that I have called Colorzilla. If I click on that, notice that we get this menu. We can do that as well using Quasar. We can create our own menus, or pop-up menus as they're called, for our browser extensions. And we can even inject code into other websites. So for example, GitHub or YouTube, or maybe you've got a Microsoft app and you want to kind of inject some code in there and enhance the experience. There's all sorts of cool things that you can do with browser extensions. The possibilities are endless. So hopefully your brain is exploding with excitement right now. Quasar creates lots of possibilities to web developers like you and me and makes it super, super easy to get up and running, but still gives us plenty of flexibility, which you'll find out about later on in this series. Now, closing this down, we're going to go back to an SPA. Hey, Quasar, I want to develop an app and set the mode equal to SPA. There we go. The next thing I want you to get excited about is that Quasar is simple by default, but customizable enough to suit your needs. So let's just close out the console for a second and open up our file browser. We're going to jump into Source, Pages, Index Page, and that's basically this page that you see in the middle here. And I have a little bit of code that basically fetches some to-dos from this fake API. So if I control-click that, you can see that we just get an array of to-dos there. Closing that out, and it just sets the results of that to this data ref. I'll show you what I mean. Let's replace this image with a pre-tag, and I'm just going to whack in that data, and you can see the data there. You might go full screen so you can see it a little bit better. There it is. Now check out how easy it is to get that data into a table with Quasar. We can come in here and say Q-table, and I want to set the rows for that table equal to the data. Save it, and it's as simple as that. Now we have a table with all the columns figured out for us. All of the data gets injected in there. We get pagination as well. And in this series, I'm going to show you how we can tap into individual cells or tap into an entire row. The pagination, basically everything that this table has to offer, we can customize. It's a very beautiful and impressive API, and I want to make sure that we don't miss some of the cool stuff that Quasar's component library offers us out of the box. Lastly, I wanted to mention that Quasar has an awesome track record for stability. It was the first major framework to move to Vue 3, and it had very few breaking changes between Vue 2 and Vue 3. So, in other words, the API is very, very stable. To wrap up on why you're going to love this series, 1, you'll be able to build an app that works on Android, iOS, Mac, PC, Linux, as an SPA, PWA, SSR, or even a browser extension. That's way too many acronyms. 2, you'll have access to a world-class component library that's ridiculously easy to use, as I've shown you here with the Qtable, yet customizable enough to cover your complex needs. And 3, you'll have command over a framework that has a track record of staying up to date and a strong focus on backwards compatibility. So a lot of you that have been around the block before know how important it is to have an API that isn't going to break on you in the future. Quasar is that framework. It is very well thought out and meticulously crafted. Okay, sound good? Sweet. Let's go ahead and get started. I think you're going to love the flexibility that Quasar gives you when creating a new app. Now, Quasar supports npm, yarn, pnpm, and bun. In this video, we're going to be using yarn. Yarn, create Quasar, but if you wanted to use a different package manager, you can replace yarn here with the name of your package manager. So let's go ahead and run that, and then it's going to ask us a few questions. What would we like to build? An app with Quasar CLI. What's the project folder? How about Quasar-Playground? And we can pick a Quasar version as well. So Quasar has really good backwards compatibility. It still works very well with Vue 2, but in this video, we're going to be using Quasar version 2, which uses Vue 3 under the hood. If you like, you can choose TypeScript here. However, to reach a larger audience, we're going to pick JavaScript for our type of project. And then we have an option of the CLI variant. So Quasar supports Vite and Webpack, and it's currently in the process of moving to Vite 5. By the time you watch this video, Vite 5 is probably stable. So let's go ahead and choose Vite 5. For the package name, I'm just going to leave that as Quasar Playground. For the project product name, how about just Quasar space Playground? Description, how about a beautiful place filled with components? Author, I'm going to leave that as myself. And now we get to choose a component style. You're almost certainly going to want Composition API with script setup. However, you can also choose Composition API without script setup. That's what this option is, or Options API. So I'm going to select the first option there, and we can choose a CSS preprocessor. I'm going to leave that as Sass. If you don't want to use Sass, you can go ahead and select none there. So we'll select Sass. And now we get to choose the extra bits and pieces. We definitely want to use ESLint. If you've never worked on a project with ESLint set up correctly, you're going to absolutely love this. It's really cool, and we'll dive a little deeper into ESLint in the next video. So we'll select that and these other options. Now, the only reason I'm choosing these other two options here is because they give us a nice example of what a Quasar boot file looks like, and we'll be looking at Quasar boot files later on in this series. Okay, moving on. Pick an ESLint preset. I personally don't like Prettier. If you've used it before and you like it, you can enable Prettier, but we're going to use standard in this video. Yes, Quasar, I would like you to install the dependencies with Yarn. And when that's done, we're going to cd into the project and open it in Visual Studio Code. cd quasar-playground code dot. And welcome to Quasar. Let's throw the editor on the right side of the screen and make a little bit more space here. And we can go ahead and start playing around with some of the modes that we can run Quasar in. So let's see if we can run our project as an SPA, an SSR app, and an Electron app. And to do this, I'm going to install the Quasar CLI. npm install-g at quasar/CLI. And this is basically just a CLI tool that makes it easier to run Quasar commands. It just means instead of saying, for example, yarn Quasar, so we can do that to get the Quasar CLI, but instead of doing that, we can now just say Quasar. Okay, let's run our app in SPA mode. Hey Quasar, I want to develop an app. Can you please set the mode equal to SPA? Now, as it turns out, SPA is the default mode, so we can remove all of that entirely and just say Quasar dev. And there we go. That's the default Quasar app. We get a menu on the left here with a few essential links. And we're up and running with Quasar. So next, let's try an SSR app. Hey Quasar, I want to develop an app. Can you please set the mode equal to SSR? We give that a moment to run, and there's our SSR app. All right, let's try another one. How about an Electron app? Hey Quasar, I want to develop an app. Can you please set the mode equal to Electron? Now it's going to install all dependencies that it needs to run an Electron app, which is really cool, handles all that stuff for us behind the scenes. And there's our app running in Electron. So Electron basically allows us to build Linux, Mac, and Windows apps. Okay, closing that out, there's a couple of things that I want to show you now. If we jump into our file browser, we have two new directories here. One of them is source Electron, and one of them is source SSR. Now, we're still going to write most of our code, if not all of our code, inside of this source directory. That's the code that will be common between all of the platforms. So Quasar's done the hard work of allowing us to write all of our code in this one directory and then setting up development and build processes for working for all of these different platforms. However, if we have to do Electron-specific stuff, then we can jump into the source Electron directory. And that's almost like jumping out of the Quasar world or jumping out of the Vue world and then jumping into the Electron world. Same with SSR. If there's any SSR-specific code we need to write, we can do it all in here. And I want to take a quick moment to note, we won't be covering capacitor in this video, which is what you use to build mobile apps. And that's mostly because it requires a few more bits and pieces to get up and running. So we'll cover mobile apps a little bit later on in this series, but don't worry, that's coming soon. So to finish up, let's go ahead and create something in our app. Let's replace this image here with a button. Jumping into source, pages, index page. That's this component here. And I might just zoom out one time. We'll start by doing a little bit of cleanup. This define options section isn't necessary. Vue is automatically going to look at the name of the component and name it index page for us. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Let's move the script tag to the top. Just a convention that I like. And let's go ahead and replace this image with a Q-button. All Quasar components are prefixed with a Q-. So this page is a Quasar component, and this button is a Quasar component. Also, we don't have to import Quasar components. They're automatically imported for us, including their typing. So if we hover over this component, you can see that all of the types are there as well. And that just means if I did, for example, control space, we can see all of the stuff that this component can do. And I'm just going to add a label. Label is equal to hello Quasar. And how about we give it a color equal to red? Save it. And I stopped my server. So let's go ahead and run the server again. This will be good practice. Quasar, dev. And there's our button. Now, I don't really like the formatting here. I prefer to do it the quote unquote Vue way. So let's put all of these properties on a new line and change this to a self-closing tag. Save it and it still works. But we don't want to have to do all of that formatting ourselves every time. So in the next video, we're going to be setting up ESLint. Let's get linting working with Quasar. You're really going to love this. Control-Shift-X to open up my extensions. And if you type in here @recommended, which I've already done, it's going to show you all of the workspace extensions. In other words, the extensions that Quasar recommends you install for a pleasant experience using Quasar. So I recommend that you go ahead and install all of these, especially Vue Official and ESLint. You might also need to restart VS Code when all of that's done. Okay, next up, let's open my file browser, and we're going to jump into .eslintrc.cjs. This is how we configure our linting rules. And the first thing I want to do is go straight to the top and remove this line here, Vue 3 Essential. Basically, this is saying, I want you to use the essential Vue 3 linting rules. So the rules that Vue says you really should be following these rules to make your code readable when you're using Vue 3. We can also use strongly recommended, but the one that I prefer to use is recommended. This is the strictest linting rules that we can use. So I prefer to start there, and if anything annoys me, then we can scroll down to the rules section and we can easily turn rules on and off if they get in the way. And you can see that Quasar has noticed some rules that get in the way with Quasar, and therefore it's turned them off. And we can also see a few rules that it's actually turned on. So in this case, if you break the import/named rule, you're going to get an error. And now that all of this is set up, let's go back into our index file, source, pages, index page, and go back to the original formatting. And now look at what happens when we save the file. It automatically formats everything for us. How cool is that? Super, super handy, and it means that we can write our code a lot faster. In fact, a lot of the time when I'm writing code, I just do everything in one long line, especially inside of the template, and then it automatically formats for me when I save it. This is a huge productivity boost. You're going to love linting if you haven't tried it before. Now, there are some linting rules that I don't like. For example, if I have a variable that I'm just kind of playing around with, for example, const unused variable is equal to a blank string. Notice that I get a red squiggly. Now, that's a little bit much for me. When I'm developing, I don't want to get red squigglies and show-stopping errors just because I have an unused variable. So what we can do is we can copy the rule here. So let's go ahead and copy that, no unused vars. Jump into ESLint rc.cjs. And then inside of this rules object, I'm just going to add it in here. No unused vars. And let's set that equal to a warning. So by default, it's set to an error, but I'm saying, you know what? Warn me, I want to know that I've got an unused variable, but you don't have to scream at me about it. And the other thing we can do is turn it off entirely if we like. Okay, so let's go back now to our index page. And now we just get a yellow squiggly. So that's a little bit nicer. We're going to add one more rule because I think you're going to particularly love this one. This rule is going to allow us to automatically order our component tags. So remember in the previous video, I put the script tag at the top and then the template tag? We can actually enforce that with a linting rule. Vue/component-tags-order. We'll make that an array. And at the start of this array, we'll say warn, so throw a warning if this rule is broken. And then let's configure this. For the order, I first want it to be script. So script at the top. Then I want template. Then I want style tag. So you can set this to any order that you like. This is the order that we'll use in this series. Now, check this out. Back to the index page, let's grab this script tag and throw it down the bottom. And when we save the file, boom, it switches. How cool is that? Now, one of the great things about this is you can implement new rules, and if they can automatically be fixed, then we can tell the linter to run it across all of our files. That's what we're going to do right now. So if we go to the error not found page, notice that a few of these linting rules are broken, especially this one where the script tag is at the bottom. I can come into our console and say yarn lint --fix. So I want to run the linter, and as it's running, if it can fix the problems, then go ahead and do that. So let's run that, and notice that it's automatically fixed this file for us. So now the script tag is at the top. So rather than having to go into every single file and save it, we were able to run this one command that fixed it for us. And it's also saying here, I found one error that I couldn't fix. So if I control click that, we can see that it wasn't able to fix this unused variable error. Now check this out. Let's throw that over onto the side, maybe create a bit more space here and run our server, Quasar dev. And notice that we get this little window at the bottom, well, not so little, that shows us that we have a linting error. And in order to find that error, we can click on the link, and that takes me directly to where the error is. In fact, let me show you that. If I close all of these files out and click on that link, it shows you exactly where that linting error occurs. Now, I think showing this window all the time is a little bit overkill. That annoys me a bit whilst developing. Let's make it so that by default, it's closed. Otherwise, every time we refresh the page, it's going to show up again. Okay, scrolling down into our Quasar config file, there's a section here where we use the Vite plugin checker. So to find that, you might want to do Control F, Vite-plugin-checker. We're just going to add another option here, which is overlay. So, hey, Vite, I want you to tap into this overlay, and for initial is open, set that to false. Save it, give that a moment, and now we can refresh the page all day long and not get annoyed by that window, but we can see down the bottom here we've got an error, and when we're ready to fix those errors, we can click in there, click on where the error occurred, and then fix it up. And I can go, whoops, I've got an unused variable, get rid of it, save the file, and now ESLint isn't complaining anymore. How cool is that? I think this is a wonderful dev experience, and you're going to love having those options available to you throughout this series. Quasar comes with a massive material design component library, and it's gorgeous. So before we push on, let's have a play with the QBtn component to get a feel for how this library works. First of all, we can change the size. And Quasar comes with 5 sizes that it uses across different components. We have extra small, small, medium, which is going to be the default, large, and then extra large. So that's how we can change the size. We can also be more specific. So for example, 62 pixels, or maybe something like 1.2 EM. That's also going to work. But we'll leave it at extra large for now, just so it's a bit easier for you to see. We can also change the color, of course. So you've already seen the red color here, but notice that if I cross that out and then do Control Space, we get some really nice auto completion here. If Voila is set up correctly for you, then you should be able to see this list. They're the colors that Quasar gives us out of the box. If you want more of a visual idea of what they all look like, we can go to quasar.dev/style/color palette. And of course, you could probably search this in the Quasar docs to find it quickly. Let's come down here, and you can see we get a whole bunch of the colors that are available to us, including some related to success, for example, positive and negative. But we are going to cover a few of these things later on in the series. So let's push on for now. And I might change this to deep purple 9. So that last number is the brightness of the color. Anything from 1 through to 10 is how bright that color will be. We also get some accent colors. Anything from 11 to 14 are our accent colors. So 11 through to 14. And again, you can go to the color palette section to get an idea of what those accent colors look like before you choose one. Okay, what else can we do? We can also change the kind of button. Now, by default, notice that we have a little bit of a shadow around the button and a solid background. We can also say here, outline to have an outlined button, flat, and notice when you hover a flat button, you can still see the shape of it. So this is something that's a little bit more understated, and unelevated. Unelevated doesn't look much different. It just means that it's flattened out, but still has that nice purple background. So if you prefer more of a flat design, you might want to use unelevated for your buttons rather than the default that gives you that little bit of shadow. So that's good to know. What else can we do? Well, we can change the roundness of the button. If we say rounded here, it curves the edges. So I think that looks pretty good. And we can also say round. So notice there's a difference between rounded and round. And round doesn't really look very good by default because it's mostly designed for things like icons. So if we get rid of all of this text here and leave it as a H, you can see that does look a little bit better when there's less inside the button. Speaking of icons, we can say here icon is equal to book, and Quasar is going to use the material library by default. Let's just get rid of the label so that looks better. There are, of course, ways that you can choose your own icon library, but we'll be covering icons in more depth later on in this series. Next, let's have a look at the default slot. So I'm going to get rid of this icon, crack open this button, and let's just put some text in there, like the letter T, for example. So you can see that the default slot just throws something inside of the button, as you'd expect. And this is particularly useful for things like floating badges. So if we say Q-badge here to use Quasar's badge component, we can say floating to make it a floating badge, give it a color of red, and how about we put a number in there like 88? And now we've got this badge that says, for example, you have 88 new books or whatever. So if we came back here and added that icon back in, and now it looks like you have 88 book notifications. Pretty cool stuff. So there you have it, a basic rundown of how Quasar's components work. And of course, we'll be covering a few more components throughout this series.